So I get this comment a lot from just about every student that is either here or online. And the comment is this: how do I get better at playing the guitar? And almost always, the best answer I can give them is, chances are, if you're feeling like you're not progressing the way you want, there's something missing from your current understanding. And that's what I want to address in this video right after this. So we have the impression, I think, when it comes to the idea of getting better, that we have to sit with the instrument for endless hours at a time, forgive the computer, and sort of slog it out to be able to get better. I haven't defined what that means yet. We'll get into a few topics on that. That's not an approach that I find very healthy for the more or less recreational player. For those of you out there that feel destined to become the next Steve Vai or Malmsteen or whomever, yes, your practice regime will be very deep, very heavy. But for most of us, we don't need to do that to derive a lot of enjoyment from the instrument. So I want to start exploring some of the things that might be missing from your current understanding of the guitar that will actually help you get better. And when I say missing, it's usually just a piece of information that hasn't been applied yet. You haven't used it in your playing. So the notion to carry through this whole video that I want you to hold on to is familiarity of a concept is not enough. And lots of people are familiar with a lot of things because there's a lot of information out there. So familiarity is not a problem. What is a problem is knowing rather than just being familiar. And now that's a bit of a heavy term, because to know something is to sort of feel it in your bones. It's unquestionable as far as you're concerned. You've got it. That takes time. It does take effort. It's going to take some repetition. It's going to take some tenacity. But it's totally doable if you get into the habit of consistency. That's a missing feature for a lot of people. They'll practice heavy with a new idea for maybe even a whole month at a time, and then they'll just abandon it and won't touch it, if ever again, or for the next few months. And so whatever muscle you built up starts to dwindle away. Consistency in your approach to gaining new knowledge will always be your best friend. Okay, so whatever I just said, I want to give you some tangible examples of what it is I actually mean. Let's start with the scale that the majority of guitarists seem to get exposed to first. And that is our good old friend, the minor pentatonic scale. Now, interestingly enough, I didn't get exposed to that first in my own studies. And I actually never learned about it until many years after finishing my studies with my first guitar teacher. Good, bad, or otherwise, that's just the way it was. But in hindsight, he had a good reason for what he was doing, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But the minor pentatonic still stands out as the go-to scale for a guitarist if you ask them, can you play any scales? Most will be able to say, at least I'm familiar with one, or I know it, and They can maybe pull out some licks from it, which is all good. But the thing that's missing from their knowledge base is that more often than not, it's only one pattern of 5, if we think in terms of our the caged system, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. If you think in terms of that, it's only that trusty 5th fret pattern. To me, it's pattern 4. For some people, it's pattern 1. That's irrelevant. You can call it whatever you like. It's well worn. It's very friendly under the fingers, and hence people use it and abuse it in a good way for many, many, many years. The thing that's missing is there are other ways to play the minor pentatonic that all essentially connect up together along the fretboard. So if you're seeing somebody whiz up and down the fretboard, potentially at one level they're capable of doing that because they have studied other versions, other shapes of the minor pentatonic beyond that first one that we all love and cherish. And they've brought their knowledge base of those other versions up to the same level as the one they know the best, the one they were introduced to. So any one of them in their playing skill set are equally accessible, are equally as accessible as any other one is. It's not just a sort of a default thing that we move to. So typically you'd want to increase your knowledge base of the other minor pentatonic forms. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to use all the notes of each form in order to create something beautiful. It just means you have to be familiar enough and use it often enough that it can come out of your fingers what looks like instinct, but we both know you got it because you put some time in on it. And when I say time, I'm not talking about, again, 3-4 hours of slogging through something. I mean every day you wake up and you have an opportunity to play and rehearse and practice and enjoy music, you should explore the other versions of the minor pentatonic. That's all. And then over the span of a few months, it doesn't take that long, you'll find yourself using these other versions, what appears to be almost instinctively, but it's been worked on, it's been thought about, and it's been physically rehearsed enough that you begin to own it. And that's the key feature. So with regards to the minor pentatonic, what's missing is get some other forms of the scale under your fingers. And don't worry, I have a PDF for you that you can download, and I will give you some suggestions as to how you can work with the other forms and some practical ideas on how to build up learning those forms. So I'm not going to leave you in the dark. The next area that is woefully missing from a lot of contemporary players, for many years actually, is a knowledge of the major scale. Here's the thing about the major scale. It's a rather bold statement, but it's true. Everything we do and think about in Western music, that is Western civilization, not country and Western, in Western music is fundamentally based on the major scale. So why would something like that be overlooked in the education of a guitarist? Fundamentally, people will get exposed to it eventually, especially if they're trying to understand how certain things actually work in music. The explanation as to why certain things work ultimately can be traced back to knowledge of the major scale. And if you don't have it, and you're trying to make sense of all this disconnected information that's currently out there, you're going to have a really difficult time knitting all this stuff together so that you can carry that knowledge around in you in a coherent fashion. It doesn't tend to get taught. I'm not saying in a linear way, but in a logical, progressive way. It doesn't mean you can't go sideways for a while and do some other things, but come back to the spine of the major scale and spend time with it. Also, the language that we use in terms of harmony and chords and, you know, just the grammar of music comes from, again, your knowledge of a major scale. So if you're playing a guitar and your knowledge of the major scale is missing, it's kind of like riding a bike without an awareness of balance. That might be a bit of a leap, but that's kind of the connection. You sort of have to know about balance to ride a bike. If you don't pay attention to what balance feels like, especially if you turn, then riding a bike is going to be a very painful experience for you, no matter how badly you want to do it. And you may eventually get to ride the bike, but you will have many scars built up in order to get there. It's not necessary. You don't have to do that. You can take it in small chunks, just like the previous example, and use it consistently. Talk to other players in terms of things that come out of the major scale. So something practical then, you want to be more familiar with more shapes on how to play the major scale. You want to be more, not familiar, you want more knowledge. You want more knowledge on things called intervals that exist within the major scale, any scale for that matter. But this is a good place to start your understanding of intervals, especially on a fretboard, which is a visual interface for most people. Seeing interval distances in terms of the scale helps them navigate the fretboard far more easily than, for example, note knowledge. That takes longer for them to develop. You can certainly weave your way around the fretboard with no knowledge of any scale. But you know in your heart of hearts when you're playing, you actually have no clue what you're doing. You might be guided by your ear, in which case you're nicely blessed with perhaps the X factor to help you learn the guitar. But generally speaking, that's not the majority of people. They need the language of music. Connected to the shapes and the intervals and the notes, again, the cage system always creeps its way into the equation. Even though I know there's some people out there that don't like the cage system, that's fine. Don't use it. I'm not telling you to use it. But I am saying that anything is useful. It's only useful, though, if you put it to use. as simple as that sounds. So if you just out and out disregard something for whatever reason, there's probably another story behind that the rest of us don't know about. But, you know, there's value in any approach. Caged versus, for example, 3-note per string systems. So that's number 2. Point number 3 is chord knowledge. The majority of players, when I meet up with them, their chord knowledge is singularly based on shape. That's it. No knowledge of the notes that make up the chord, no knowledge of where the chord comes from, as if it just got invented. I can assure you, nobody woke up one Tuesday morning, jumped out of bed and said, "Behold, today I will create something called a chord, and I will call it, let's say, G minor, and it will be this shape." That never did happen, and it never will happen. And it's funny, in all the years I've taught, nobody's ever asked me, why are chords the shape they are? Like, are people just making up shapes and then giving these things names? Guess where the structure of the chord comes from? The major scale. By the way, even the minor pentatonic scale can be traced back to the major scale. So if you're listening to this video right now and you have absolutely no experience with the major scale, you have a major black hole in your comprehension of music in general, and certainly how it applies on the guitar. I would get that fixed as quickly as possible. Again, my PDF that I'm offering to you for free. Just drop me your best email and I'll send it off to you. That is going to give you some ideas to help you build the knowledge, some practical knowledge that you would need from the major scale. You can go very deep into it, but we need not to at this point. You just need something to kickstart the process. And I have a fourth point, which is very close to my heart, and that is when it comes to playing, actually playing a guitar, whether you're using a pick or you're finger styling, whatever your interests are, if as you play, you have not an awareness of a pulse, some people call it a beat, that's present in the music as you play, and then from that pulse, your ability to sort of subdivide the spaces between the pulses. For example, you may have heard terms like, this sound, it lasts for one beat. This sound lasts for half a beat. That sound lasts for a quarter of a beat. These three notes make up one beat. This kind of awareness is woefully missing among guitarists. And most of it is happening because they've made a decision earlier in their playing that they don't want to read music. I get it. It is a separate skill, and it's not completely necessary, but more knowledge on anything that you're interested in doesn't hurt you. It only adds to what you're trying to accomplish. So I wouldn't out and out just disregard it because the prevailing winds in Guitarlandia say, you don't need to read this, you don't need to just feel it. Well, okay, for the person who's good at feeling it. But the person sitting next to that person might not have a clue about what it means to feel the rhythm or feel the time. They need a bit more of a structured process. So that could be missing from your ability to progress to another level in your guitar playing. It isn't just about the sounds you make on strings, the way you hold a pick, how you sit with a guitar, how you stand with a guitar, how your fingers make chords. Those are all very physical actions that are relatively easily taught, which, by the way, is why that's what you mostly see here in the YouTube universe. you see people teaching physical skill sets, i.e. I want to play this song, I want to learn that scale, I want my fingers to be faster. It's a physical thing. Rhythm is an internal thing. What I often refer to as a dark art, just like the Harry Potter series. It's a dark art. It's going on within the musician. And if you do not have that happening while you play, that's a really big element of what's missing to help you get better. Because here's the sad truth about playing a guitar. If when you play, let's just pretend you're doing a bunch of chords around the campfire, if when you play, your chords are a little, or rather they're very pristine, you've worked very hard at making sure all the notes come through cleanly, and yet your rhythm in your strumming behavior or the timing of your playing is a little jagged, it feels off so that people can't maintain a steady clap or kind of move to it in a predictable way, they actually don't think you can play, even though you've put in all this effort on the chord side of things. But the reverse of this is often not true. If your chords, or anything that you're playing, arpeggios, single notes, solo, doesn't matter. If you're hitting some bad tones once in a while, or you're buzzing out certain sounds, which we're all guilty of, but you keep the train moving down the track with this awareness of time and pulse and anticipation, it hooks people in automatically. They get it without even knowing what it is they're getting. They just know they get it, and you've got them. The audience is hooked into you. They are not going to complain about the odd buzzing this and that comes from your technical playing skills. They might complain that your rhythm skills need a lot of work. And here's the kicker. In guitar world, I call it Guitarlandia, rhythm is often rarely looked at. We teachers tend to just hope you have a good sense of it and we can get on to the more fun stuff. Teaching rhythm, without necessarily having to read it, developing an awareness of rhythm, is a critical skill for any musician. And guitarists just tend to sort of bypass it for a long time until it kind of hits them right in the face and they realize, yeah, I should have worked on that stuff a lot earlier. So, rhythmic language could be missing. Rhythmic feel could be missing from your playing skill set. And it can interfere with a whole bunch of things. You know, just changing chords not on time because your fingers can't land there quick enough, that's a physical thing. But if you keep repeating that, you might think, if I just keep repeating it, eventually I'm going to get it. Yeah, okay, maybe. But more than likely what's happening is your brain is getting used to you not getting the next chord quick enough. And you keep repeating that. So you tend to get, sorry about the computer there, you tend to get better at doing the thing that you're trying to not get better at, if you know what I mean. So you get stuck in this weird space of I'm not progressing, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. No wonder. Because you're not changing the way you're addressing the problem. You're just repeating, repeating, repeating. Because somebody said, just go home and practice, practice, practice. I know what they mean when they say that, and they do mean well. But there's more to it. So, what have we got? Let's do a summary here. What's missing that could potentially be holding you back in your playing skills? Let's do a summary then of some of the features that might be missing from your bigger comprehension of playing that's actually holding you back from progressing. So the first one is getting more familiar with other versions of the minor pentatonic scale. Easy to say, not easy to do. And you don't have to learn all 5. I would say a minimum of 3, including the one that you're already good at, so you really only need 2 more. You can solo for the rest of your time on the planet with 3 of these patterns that feel comfortable to you, and you're golden. If you want to do all 5, do all 5. But make a commitment to learning the other ones that you're not as familiar with, as well as the one that you already know, as skillful at that. Second one, sort of related, is the major scale. The major scale is the source of all the language that we tend to use in Western music. It's the source of understanding where chords come from. It's the source of understanding interval language. It is the source, if you really trace it back far enough, it's the source for any scale you ever get introduced to for the rest of your time. So why wouldn't you know this? Why are we bypassing that? Let's not do that. Let's make a commitment to that major scale. Yeah, I get it. It's not the sound that you hear when you're playing a lot of rock tunes. It's not the sound that comes from the song. Play your tunes, enjoy them, do what you need to do, but step sideways from them once in a while and study the major scale, knowing that its role is to supply you with a confident foundation of musical language that will enable you to learn other concepts down the road a lot more easily, and they feel more connected. There's not this terrible sense of this piece of info, that piece of info, how do they relate? Oh, it makes no sense to me. If it makes no sense to you, you're missing something. And chances are it's the major scale and all that it provides. Chord knowledge is another one. I'm a big advocate for helping students leave their knowledge of chords based only on shape. I'm not saying disregard it. The fretboard is a visual interface, so we do rely on that. But don't stay there. There's more going on underneath that shape than you're currently aware of. And if you are aware of it, it makes learning other chords way more easy and makes them, in terms of their names, makes the names much more easy to understand. Where does, G minor 7 flat 9 come from? Like, what does that mean? It's just a recipe, right? And if you don't have that knowledge floating around, it's very intimidating. You just feel like you're just not part of the community anymore. It's not that difficult. It's just you got to take the leap and start doing it. And then finally, my favorite is rhythm. Rhythm, oh my gosh, it's so big and so important. Again, some people have it instinctively. Good for you. We're pleased you're out there. We're going to learn a lot from you. But the majority of us are not that. We need something a little more systematic. So I hope you found those 4 points helpful to give you some guidance on some things that might be missing from your current understanding of guitar. And of course, we're just scraping the surface here. In the PDF that's available to you, I'll go into some more examples about practical examples, how you can use these 4 ideas to start to bring up your skill base so that as you progress more down the road of guitar, what you get introduced to is easier to digest instead of you having to get overwhelmed with all the information that's out there. I'm all about helping people make connections from one idea to the next so that there's a logic behind it. And especially regarding the rhythm point, if that's of interest to you specifically, I would invite you to check out the link below in the notes where I have the STRUM HUB membership. We go into rhythm much more deeply in this. This is an ongoing membership. The idea is to help players learn to listen to a piece of music at a level that allows them to pull some information from it that will guide how they strum it. Because you don't want to always be asking somebody, how do I strum this song? Or what's the strum pattern for that song? Those are terrible questions. Because it will make your playing sound very generic, and you'll probably start to experience all your music starting to sound the same, because all you're doing is sticking some standard strum pattern on top of the song. You're not really pulling out the vibe of the song. That's what the STRUM HUB is all about, helping students to develop that skill set. It's an ear-based approach with a little bit of reading of rhythms and no reading of musical notation. So if you're interested, I invite you to check that out. And until we meet next time, I wish you well in your studies and more to come. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.